Welcome to video 5 of our College Preparedness Workshop video series. In this video, we are going to pick up right where we left off in video 4 and begin by providing some note-taking highlights. Let's go ahead and get started. In our Introduction to Note-Taking workshop, we cover several different topics on the subject, including the introduction of a few different note-taking methods, and how to go about studying your notes once they have been created. For this college preparedness workshop, we are going to just focus on what the elements of effective notes are and highlight one note-taking method in particular. So what exactly are effective notes? Effective notes are considered to be clear, comprehensive, and relatively concise notes that allow you to learn and understand the material you are being presented with, whether that be in an in-person lecture, an online lecture, or simply while reading your textbook on your own. Let's break that definition down a little bit more. What do we mean precisely when we say clear? Clear should be written in a way that you can reread and understand later. While we definitely encourage you to use abbreviations when creating your notes, make sure that any word or words you choose to abbreviate can be fully understood by you later when rereading or studying them. If you can't recall what the original word was that you abbreviated, then there is no benefit at all to making the word shorter in the interest of time. Now, what do we mean by comprehensive? That simply means your notes may need to cover a great deal of material. Whatever lecturer that may be speaking to you that day could be talking at a very fast rate and present a ton of material. And finally, concise. Concise just means highlighting main points without being too detailed. After all, if you're in front of a lecturer who is indeed speaking fast, you are likely not going to be able to notate every single word said, especially when you're writing your notes by hand. Effective notes are also widely viewed by many to be an essential tool for success at the college level, which is, of course, why these highlights are included in this workshop. But unfortunately, they are all too often underemphasized at the high school level. Now that we have a picture of what effective notes should include, let's talk about one way to structure your notes. One highly recommended method for taking notes is called the Cornell note-taking method. The Cornell method is actually more than just a note-taking structure. It is actually a system for taking, organizing, and reviewing notes, and was devised by a Cornell University professor by the name of Walter Pock in the 1940s. This method is designed for mastering information and not simply recording facts. Each step of the Cornell method process prepares you for the next step. The Cornell method typically uses a system that divides your piece of paper into 3 or 4 different sections. Section 1 is considered the title section and is where you're going to want to write down the overall topic being covered in the lecture or the section of book you are reading, the date, and the name of the class. While this is not an official section of the classic Cornell method, it is highly recommended in order for you to stay organized. Section 2 is called the note-taking column and is the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the Cornell method. This section should be around 70% of your page width, or about 6 inches in from the right-hand side of a standard sheet of paper. This is where you're going to write down all your notes while you're listening to your class lecture or while you're reading your book. In this section, you're going to be writing details, facts, figures, formulas, dates, definitions, examples, any pictures or sketches you want to draw, anything that you find relevant and important to remember. When you write things down in this section, use telegraphic sentences, which are sentences using around 5 words or less, like you might find in a telegram, or abbreviations, again, ones that you will remember later, in order to save space and allow for faster note-taking. In this section, you should also skip lines between ideas so you can come back later and fill in more detail. Once your class or lecture is over, or even when you're done reading your textbook and you've finished writing out all the information you found important in this section 2, you then come to section 3, what we call the Q column or the recall column. This section should be set up on the left-hand side of your paper and should be around 30% of your page width, or in about 2.5 inches from the left-hand side. Here, you will review and clarify the main notes you wrote in section 2. Next to each main note or topic from section 2, you are going to write in section 3 keywords, cues, questions to be answered later when you're reviewing your notes, comments, anything that might make that information from section 2 easier to remember. While you could fill in some of this cue column during the lecture or during your active reading session, most, if not all, of this section should be completed after the end of the lecture or after you're done reading your textbook. The reason for this is that section 3 is summarizing or creating questions for better understanding of that information from section 2. Without a complete picture of the lecture or the section you're reading in your textbook, it's difficult to fully encapsulate everything found in section 2. Finally, we come to section 4 of the Cornell method, the summary section. This section should be around 2 inches up from the bottom of your page. It is where you will give a general summarization of all the notes from your entire page. Your summary should be brief, around 5 to 7 lines max, and be written in your own words so you can clearly understand it later when reviewing your notes. Section 4 should be completed as soon as possible after the completion of the lecture or after you're finished reading your textbook, but no more than 24 hours later. After about 24 hours, your memory can begin to deteriorate. So you want to make sure that section 4 is completed while the information is still relatively fresh in your mind. To give you a sense of what your finished Cornell method notes may look like, here is one example of how your notes might look when completed. That is the end of our note-taking highlights section for this workshop. If you would like to learn more on this topic, please check out the in-depth full version of our Introduction to Note-Taking Workshop video series. To continue on and learn some highlights of a few test-taking strategies, please go now to video 6 and the conclusion of our College Preparedness Workshop video series.